got to walk in a victory before we see a victory. Sometimes we got to walk through a battle before we see the end of the battle. So he's standing there, his arms are getting tired. So along comes a guy named Hur, and along comes a guy named Aaron, and they lift his arms up and hold his arms up. So they're holding his arms up. So this is that battle. So this is how we're introduced to these people. They're not nice people. So anyway, let's look at verse 14. Verse 14, God sees this, God notices this, and this is what God says to Moses. God doesn't just put accidental words in the Bible. He does it. He puts everything in there for an intent meaning. And he said this to Moses, and he wrote it down and recorded it. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, because Joshua will be the one who takes the reins and runs as leader after you. Make sure Joshua knows this very well, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. I will utterly blot out, I will destroy Amalek from the face of the earth. Why? Because that's what he wanted to do to you. That's what he wanted to do to Moses and the nation of Israel. Didn't even know how to hold a sword, and this bunch is wanting to kill him. So, God's written it. He's made a vow. He's promised it. So, the word just, time continues to move forward. God's not going to do it tomorrow. So he might, but years later, there comes the guy along, and he's anointed the very first king of Israel, and his name is Saul. He's anointed the very first king of Israel. He's a big, tall, good-looking guy, kind of like somebody in here. So he's got this. We got a lot of big, tall guys in here. They're good-looking. Some have hair, some don't. But so anyway, let's look at 1 Samuel. We're going to look at what God calls this promise due. We're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 2 and 3. God calls the promise due. It's been a lot of years. Thus says the Lord of hosts. He's saying this to Saul. I have noted what Amalek did to Israel and opposing them when on their way when they came up out of Egypt. I noticed all that. Now go, and I want you to strike the Amalekites. I want you to devote to destruction all that they have. I don't want you to spare any bit of them. I want you to kill both man and woman. And you've heard me. This has been recent too. Child and infant and ox and sheep and camel and donkey. In other words, I don't want you to leave anything alive. Everything is supposed to be annihilated. Why would such a loving God want to wipe an entire nation off the face of the earth? Because let me show you something. What God did in the Old Testament is symbolic to the enemies we face today. And it's called sin. It's called past. It's called the Amalekite spirit. God said, wipe them off the face of the earth because if they get their chance, they're going to wipe you off the face of the earth. So this is what God says. When it comes to the sin or the past or the strongholds or the lies that we believe, God says, wipe those off the face of the earth. You've got to have a breakthrough. You've got to have your breakthrough. You've got to make sure that nothing comes back to haunt you. So, Saul is the man that God has chosen to call the promise to. This is pretty cool stuff. What if God walked up to you and said, look, there's something right there in the Word, and I want you to be the catalyst for which I do it. Wow. So Saul's the chosen man for the job, but you know what? Saul doesn't do what God asked him to do. Or commands him to do. He doesn't do it. He doesn't complete the mission. And the Amalekites, see, they meant to kill, to steal, and destroy Israel earlier on. See, the Amalekites wanted to exterminate Israel. So God's telling Saul to completely destroy an enemy that wants to completely destroy you. The Amalekite spirit that is on our people today wants to completely destroy us. And I'm going to show you what it looks like in just a minute. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So, Saul won that battle that day. He went out, he won that battle, but he lost with the Lord. He failed the Lord. He failed in his process with the Lord. So he failed completely, but he won the battle. He didn't wipe them off the face of the earth. He didn't kill the king. He took good goats, good sheep, good cattle. See, because of his disobedience, God stripped the kingdom and stripped the anointing of being king from him. And he said, look, I'm going to give it to this dude named David, who's nobody's choice. You're the choice because you're big and tall and good looking. But David is nobody's choice. He's not the firstborn. He's not the first, second, third, fifth, seventh. He's the eighth-born son to Jesse. Nobody's picking him. He's just a shepherd boy in the middle of nowhere with a sling and a stone. So I'm choosing him because God tells us in chapter 16, He looks upon the heart. So because of his disobedience, God stripped his anointing from him and He gave it to David. So David inherited an enemy that should have never existed. Now we're starting to get somewhere. We have a society of people, and we're crowded in here right now. We have inherited situations. We have inherited enemies that we never asked for. We have inherited this. We have inherited generational curses that we never asked for. That should have been killed a long time ago. So let me just kind of show you how the relationship with David and Saul goes. Saul loved David. He hated David. He loved David. He hated David. He loved David. He hated David. He hated David. And he hated David. He hated David way more than he loved David. As a matter of fact, he loved him and was so impressed with him that when this whole battle went down with Goliath, Saul took him home with him and he never got to go back. So let me tell you, I just want to throw something out there at you. You may not know that Saul's oldest son, Jonathan, was best friends with David. He was best friends. Saul's oldest son, Jonathan, was probably 10, 15 years older than David. Who spent time mentoring David? Who spent time teaching him how to wield a sword? Who taught him the ways of warfare? Who taught him this? My guess is, it's not scriptural, I don't know this, but my guess is this is one of the reasons he loved Jonathan so much. Jonathan taught him how to be an Israelite king. Jonathan taught him how to be a warrior shepherd. Jonathan taught him this because he took him home and he wouldn't let him go back to his home. And who's going to do that? So my guess is Jonathan. So Saul becomes very jealous, and we know all this happens. Saul gets jealous and he wants to kill David, and David goes on the run. He has to run away from his very mentors and his king. He hated him so much so that David had to join the Philistines. Now, Philistines are a different enemy, and we're going to visit them this month too. So the Philistines are a different enemy, and David has to go behind enemy lines, join the ranks of the Philistines, live in a homestead that's not his called Ziklag, and he has to live there behind enemy lines to escape Saul chasing him and trying to kill him. So now we've got David who's behind enemy lines, and I just love this about David. Sometimes we sit down and we don't hone our skills because there's no battle for us. Well, I'm not in a battle right now, so there's no point in praying. There's no point in reading my word. There's no point in journaling. There's no point in having my silence and solitude, my quiet time. There's no point in that because I'm not going through a battle right now. David could have easily said that. I'm not going through a battle right now. I'm just hanging out in Ziklag. I'm hanging out behind enemy lines. And by the way, the king that he served under, Achish, liked him a lot. He had favor with this enemy king. The dude liked him. David had favor wherever he went. So what did David and his men do? Instead of just sitting down and gaining weight and eating crackers and cheese and all this stuff, they battled for Philistines. They fought all kinds of enemies. They honed their skills. They became better warriors, and they were fierce. They were fierce warriors. The Lord and the anointing was upon them, and Achish knew it, the Philistine king. He knew it. So one day, the Philistines start gathering for battle. But this is a whole different battle this time. They're gathering for battle by the hundreds and by the thousands. So when the word says that they're lining up by the thousands, that's a lot of people going into battle. But this time they're not going to go into battle against the Jebusites or somebody like that. They're going into battle against Israel and King Saul. And who's fighting with the enemy? David and his men. Bad dudes. I'm telling you, to me, you'll never convince me that there's any fighting force more elite than these guys that has ever lived. So they're presenting themselves, and David, I kind of picture it this way. David's like, if they see us, they won't let us do this. And they're like, whoa. Who's this dude? Who are these Israelites? We can't have them. So let's look at it. Let's look at it in 1 Samuel chapter 29. Verses 2 through 4. They show up. They're presenting themselves. And as the lords, the kings, or the overseers, or the governors of Philistines were passing on by the hundreds and the thousands, David and his men passed by in the rear of Achish. Hey, how you doing? You know, passing by. And as the Lord, in verse 3, then he says, and he commands, and the commanders of the Philistines said this, what are these Hebrews doing here? And Achish said, these are the commanders of he said to the commanders of the Philistines, this is David. David's a good dude. He's a servant of Saul, king of Israel, who has been with me for all these years and all these days. He's been with me for years. We know that. And since he deserted to me, I have found no fault in him to this day. I like him. Okay? He's a good dude. Let's use him. But the commanders of the Philistines were angry with him, said, this ain't happening. I'm just going to show you what he said. This is not happening because we will go into battle with David's own countrymen and David will turn on us. We're not doing this. So I'm building up to show you about the Amalekite spirit. We're not going to do this. He will turn against us. So David's not allowed to go. Achish goes to him and says, David, not happening, dude. Can't do it. They're not going to allow you to go into battle. I like you. I trust you. But I'm going to tell you something. When it comes to a good friend or his king, David's going to choose his king. David, I'm going to tell you, David was wanting in that battle. He was meant to be in that battle. See, here's the thing. He was sent home, and when they got home, this was their homestead, their Ziklag, they're behind enemy lines, their little establishment, their homestead. So when they get there, let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 30. Now we're introduced to the Amalekites. So when he gets there, we see in verse 1 and 2. Now, when David and his men came to Ziklag, we know that's where he was living. It wasn't his home, it was just his homestead. And this was on the third day, so it took them a few days to get back. The Amalekites, here's that spirit, had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag and had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire. Their house was burned down. And not only was their house burned down, they had taken captive their women and all who were in it, both small and great, and they killed no one, but they carried them off to be their women. So, I mean, I'm married. I don't know who would want more. I don't know who would. I do good. I do fine with Tina and I, but I wouldn't want to carry off 20 or 30 more. So they carried them off. So David and his men did what everybody else would do. They grabbed their swords and they went into battle. No, they fell down and they cried and wept till they had no strength left. They just went into, oh, woe's me. They went into pitiful me. See, the Amalekite spirit showed up. The Amalekite spirit raided their home. Now, I want you to realize, the Amalekite spirit didn't just exist years ago in another part of the world. The Amalekite spirit is alive in our homes today. The Amalekite spirit raided their home. The Amalekite spirit carried off their families. And the Amalekite spirit stole from them while they were trying to do battle. Now, there's two battles brewing all the time. There's two battles brewing. One is a battle, and Paul talks about it. I have this. Paul even says, I think it's Romans chapter 4. I think it's verse 17. He says, I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but he says, I do what I don't do, and I do what I don't, and I don't, and I what. I mean, he just goes into this confusing series of scriptures that he says, look, I have a struggle here with my flesh and my spirit. So you know what? We have two battles brewing, just like there was two battles brewing then. The Philistines is one battle, and they were gathering against Saul and Jonathan in Israel by the thousands. The Amalekite is the other battle that's going on. And the Philistines represent our life. I mean, we have to fight these battles. No one's going to fight our battles for us. No one's going to kneel by our bedside and pray and then go back to their house. It's our job to do that. So it's our job to fight our battles. So this is how I fight my battles. It's the Christian walk. The Philistines represent the Christian walk, the life in Christ. The battle with the Amalekites that David was having to face. See, here's the Philistine battle over here. Saul, Jonathan, and the Israelites and Saul's other sons. But David's over here fighting a battle that he should have never been fighting. See, the Amalekites, the battle, that represents a battle that should have already been won. See, remember, Saul's job was to wipe them off the face of the earth, and all of a sudden we have the Amalekites that have burned their place and carried off their families. See, it represents past defeats. It represents past enemies that won't go away. It represents things we're carrying that should have been given to the Lord years ago. See, we're having trouble fighting our battles because we can't get away from the battles that we're not supposed to be fighting to begin with. See, David was chasing an enemy that should have never existed. That should have never existed. An enemy that he inherited. I mean, my word, David inherited an enemy that wasn't his enemy. But all of a sudden, it's made itself its enemy. See, I'm gonna be hard today. I hope it's not too hard. But some people listening to me, some people in sanctuary with us, some people watching us later on this week, some are fighting battles that they never asked for. Some are fighting battles they never asked for, generational curses that were passed down. Well, you know what? How many of you have ever heard, well, we've always been poor. I guess I'll always be poor. Well, I mean, who says you have to be poor? Who says you can't say, look, this is a generational curse I'm breaking right now in the Lord? Well, my parents, they're alcoholics, and everybody's been alcoholic, and my family were, cattle rustlers, and they stole horses and sold them, back in the day. Nobody says you have to be a thief. This is something that we're carrying, and we can't get it away, so we're passing it down. From passing down generational curses from our parents, we should have never had to deal with these. People are in here that never should have had to deal with these issues, but they're having to. Some are fighting battles, and I just want to tell you like it is. They're fighting battles that their children have dragged them into. They're fighting battles that their children have dragged them into. See, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to parents who care more about their child's addiction than their child does. And I'm going to go back to what Steve Colquitt told me a long time ago. Don't come to me with somebody's issue. The person's got to come. Mom, don't come to me. Dad, don't come to me. If the person don't get there by themselves, it ain't happening. So here's the thing. We have people who care more about their children's addictions than their children do. Some can't fight their own battles because they're constantly being drugged or dragged back into someone else's battle. Well, I can't serve the Lord. I can't serve the Lord because, you know what? My family just won't go with me. My family won't serve the Lord with me. Well, you know what? So go to hell with them then. I mean, that's what you're saying. I don't want to serve the Lord with them, but I'll go to hell with them. I'm afraid I'll be by myself. Well, you've got to work out that by yourself anyway. You can't do this for your family, or your family can't do it for you. See, I can't fight my battle with the Philistines. Everybody has one, because I'm too concerned with children or grandchildren, or I'm too focused on on anything else to focus on my own salvation. I'll do that later. See, because of popularity or peers or position, I can't serve the Lord because you don't understand. I've been church hurt. Well, join the church hurt club. Because I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to tell you two things. I'm the king. Tina's the sergeant at arms of the church hurt club. And I'm just going to tell you like it is. I'm sorry. But pull your panties up and let's go. Quit whining. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You are affecting people behind you because of your feelings. I got my feelings hurt. Everybody gets their feelings hurt. I'm sorry. We all do. We all do. You know what? Foster got an awesome promotion and job this week. 4 or 5 others got their feelings hurt. It happens. You know what? You go on. You move on. So let me give you a response to this. Hell is very, very real. Hell is very, very real. It's not warm breezes and beach sceneries and parties every night and drinks with little umbrellas in them. That's not what it is. Hell is real, and it's full of people who are too busy with someone else's battle to fight their own. It is. It's full of, you say, well, hell's full of murderers and thieves. And people who can't fight their battles. Hell's got more people with good intentions in it than it does with bad intentions. So while David was fighting the Amalekites, someone else's battle, Israel was being slaughtered by the Philistines over there. See, while David over here was fighting the Amalekites because they had stole his family, see, Jonathan, his best friend, his mentor, his guide, his brother in the Lord was being killed by Philistines' arrows right over here. See, David, while he was utterly destroying, the favor of the Lord was on him, utterly destroying the Amalekites and restoring his family, he was fighting a battle he never should have been fighting. Saul's lying half dead on the hillside of Mount Gilboa, which is where the battle was going on. He's slowly dying because he tried to kill himself and it didn't work. See, David should have been with Israel. David should have been right there. Because I'm going to tell you something. This is what I believe David would have done. David would have said, I will die beside my king before I run away from him. I will die beside Jonathan before I say, get out of here, let's go. Because David said, look, I know what God's called me to, and I know what we can do, and I know the enemy. And the Amalekite spirit cannot defeat the Holy Spirit. So here's the thing. David should have been with Israel, fighting beside Saul, fighting beside David, defending his king. He was days away in another place, fighting another battle that Saul should have won years ago. He should have never been there. So let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 2. And I'll tell you what, for time's sake, I'm just going to tell you what happens here. Saul's dying. He tried to stab himself. It's not working. He's watched his sons. He can see the dead bodies of Jonathan and his other sons. He's tried to kill himself. It's not working. The Philistines are closing in on him. And here comes a dude along. And the dude says, hey, you're the king. He says, yeah, I need you to help me. I'm anguished here. I am in bad shape. And they're going to find me and they're going to kill me. They're going to do terrible things to me. And I need you to kill me. So this guy, out of mercy, he kills the king. Out of mercy, he kills the king and he takes his crown, and he takes the armband off that represented him being king, and he runs back to David. And he runs back to David and he says, David, look, I just come from the battle. And this is what David says. Stop right there. How's it going? Tell me, please, how's it going? I got to know how. Because David's like, look, my brothers are on that hillside. He's like, everybody's dead. Everybody's either run away. We've lost homes. We've lost cities. Jonathan's dead. Jonathan's brothers are dead. Saul's dead. And this is what, I want you to notice something I'm just going to tell you. This is what the guy says. Saul says, who are you? He says, I am an Amalekite. I am an Amalekite. And I can kind of just, I can just see Saul just chuckling and saying, why should I not think it would end this way? I'm an Amalekite. Saul was killed by an Amalekite because he couldn't take care of the Amalekites earlier on. It came right back full circle. And so the Amalekite comes in, tells David, you know what David does? You know what? You come here before me and you want to say that you killed the king. You laid hands on the Lord's anointed. Kill that dude. Kill that dude. Well, what about it? You should never be alive to start with. David started his reign off by killing the Amalekites. Not by sparing them, by killing them. Saul's reign began with disobedience and sparing the Amalekites. David started the very opposite way by killing them. His reign ended in shame and disgrace, being killed by an Amalekite. If we don't kill the Amalekite spirit will kill us. Now that's tweetable right there. I don't tweet, but you could post it. If we don't kill the Amalekite spirit, I promise you, the Amalekite spirit will kill you. I promise you it will. See, here's how that spirit works. The Amalekite spirit will keep your attention on a fight that you were never intended to fight. The Amalekite spirit is a chaotic spirit. And if you've got somebody in your life that's doing nothing but causing chaos and you're having to put out fires constantly, you know what? It's time to sever that relationship and move away from them. It's like, look, I can't do this. Yeah. We have done that. And I'm like, look, I'm not playing that kind of game. I've got more important, I got Philistines to battle. I'm not going to spend my time focusing on Amalekites. It should not be here to start with. The Amalekite spirit will keep your attention on the wrong fight. The Amalekite spirit will carry off your family. They will carry off your family. They will never take responsibility for their own issues, constantly blaming everyone else. The Amalekite spirit will separate you from the intended battle, and the Amalekite spirit ultimately wants to kill the king in you. Wants to kill the king in you. Let me explain that to you. The Amalekite spirit will kill your Jesus focus, will kill your Jesus passion, will kill your prayer time, will kill your fasting time, your accountability to others. The Amalekite spirit, the first thing the Amalekite spirit will do is pull you away from people who could pray for you and lift you up and encourage you and smack you around a little bit. You know what? The Amalekite spirit will pull you out of church like that. Hey guys, you were doing this, and you stopped on us, and you watched us, and I appreciate it. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with us. I pray that you enjoyed the service today. Let me take this opportunity to invite you out personally. We're located on the square in Sparta. Our service times are at 9 and 11 every Sunday morning. We'll meet you at the door with a hug. We'll meet you at the door with some coffee ready and some donuts if you want. And let me just take a real quick minute to invite you over to our Smithville campus. For those of you who can't drive over to Sparta, drive over to Smithville, 11 o'clock for now, at 614 Murphy Street in Smithville, Tennessee. So one of our campuses, Christpoint Church, we're real people, we're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. Welcome home.